Hi, this is Maya Sharp, and you're listening to the Your Morning Coffee podcast with my friends Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart. Weekly music news for the new music business.
From Billboard, will the rise of AI music content creators start competing with traditional artists?
And for Music Business Worldwide, super listeners make up just 2% of an artist's monthly streaming audience, yet buy 50% of concert tickets, Spotify says.
And also from Music Business Worldwide, music industry backs Reintroduced Rap Act that would bar lyrics from being used as evidence in U.S. court trials.
And a last one from Music Business Worldwide. ONErpm's Emmanuel Zunz. There are no more distribution companies. There are no more record labels. There are just companies providing solutions to creators. Jay, I need solutions for so many things, but we are glad you're here. It's episode 260, believe it or not, and Jay and I are going to start the program right about now.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand!
Your morning coffee is on the air.
On the air, on the air, on the air, on the air, on the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
I'm the only girl here not wearing a dress. They're all Audrey and Grace. I'm doing my best. People I know, they glide through the party. People I don't, they're staring at me. Whispers carry, they're trying to guess.
That is such a beautiful song. That was Maya Sharp, and that's the title track from her upcoming album, Tomboy, and that comes out September 12th. Thank you, Maya, for that cool intro.
Very cool indeed. And we've got a couple of, actually a special bonus episode of the Your Morning Coffee podcast just dropped with Graham Davies. He's the DEMA president and CEO. It is live right now. And this week we've got Dan Melnick from who's Bandcamp's GM. Actually, next week you and I are going to record that. And coming soon, Dan Gill. He's the BMG executive vice president of recorded music West Coast. So we are going to be busy chatting with people.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I had coffee recently with Dan over at BMG, and he's just like us. You know, he's just a music freak and very experienced, super smart. Really looking forward to a conversation with him. And really quickly, a couple episodes of the Behind the Setlist podcast that I do with Glenn Peoples over at Billboard. The Ray LaMontagne episode is live, and Ray doesn't do very many interviews.
No.
And he's a very interesting guy, and we had a great conversation. And you and I were talking about this one time, that sometimes when you're doing interviews, it becomes a conversation, and all of a sudden the microphones go away and you're just having a conversation with someone. And that's really what this felt like. And another one like that, and again, these are actually more rare than you might think. Glenn and I sat down with Zach Brown, and we sat down with him in person at Billboard's studio in Los Angeles. And we're going to be dropping that episode pretty soon. It was inspiring. So, you and I were talking before we hit record about, I had coffee this week with Sherry Saidi from VerseWire, and we're both big fans of what they're doing there. And they've got 3 amazing releases coming this fall that we'll talk about soon. But it was a really good week.
Nice. Well, and of course, coming up with so much... I've been getting a lot of memes and things, people sending me about the new Spinal Tap movie.
Yeah.
Spinal Tap 2, The End Continues, the sequel to the classic mockumentary This Is Spinal Tap, has been increasing with teasers and clips, and now the first trailer is here. It does not disappoint, and it features appearances from Paul McCartney, Elton John, and Questlove, who declines the band's invitation to be their 12th drummer because he doesn't want to die. And hopefully you've seen the first Spinal Tap and know that that's what happens to all their drummers.
This new film centers on the band's final reunion concert in New Orleans, and it brings, the original cast, Christopher Guest, Michael McKean, Harry Shearer, all back together, along with Rob Reiner, who's a director. And there are also rumors of cameos from Garth Brooks, Trisha Yearwood, Lars Ulrich from Metallica, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Chad Smith, Paul Schaefer, who was in the original, you remember, and more. So the film, again, is Spinal Tap 2, The End Continues, and that hits theaters on September 12th, and we can't wait.
Exactly. Absolutely. I was just kind of grinning as I'm thinking about it. A great article from Madison Bloom over at Pitchfork. Lucy Dacus will officiate your wedding at one of her shows. So earlier this month, Lucy Dacus shared an idea on social media. What if she married couples on stage at her shows? She said, just thinking about how there are maybe many people looking to secure those rights ASAP for whatever reason, or logistics are getting in the way, the singer wrote on X. And oh my God, what a clever idea.
How cool would that be to be married by Lucy Dacus? She added that
at her show.
Yeah, exactly. She said, she'd do it for free. She says she's ordained in the United States and is looking for fans to tie the knot during select shows on her Forever Is a Feeling tour. So Dacus released Forever Is a Feeling in March. She resumes her tour in support of that album on July 25th.
And that album is really good, by the way. It's freaking great. Interesting piece by Melinda Newman over at Billboard. Atlantic Music Group launches country-leaning imprint. Atlantic Music Group has launched Atlantic Outpost, a singer-songwriter-oriented label rooted in country and Americana music. Billboard has learned. Very interesting.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Americana. I go to Americana Fest and Folk Alliance, and I was really thrilled to see this announcement. So this new imprint, it's going to be based in Los Angeles and Nashville, and it'll be co-run by Jeff Levin and Ian Cripps. Levin retains his role as co-head of pop and rock A&R for Atlantic, with Brandon Davis, while Cripps continues as executive VP of A&R at Atlantic.
Yep. The move comes as Los Angeles and New York-based labels continue to invest time and manpower in Nashville and the booming country space.
Yeah. Country is more popular than ever, and so is Americana. And speaking of Americana, we just mentioned Folk Alliance. They have a somewhat new executive director, and that's Jennifer Roe. And we were talking this week because they have early bird registration for Folk Alliance 2026, which is going to be in New Orleans. And that'll be January 21st through the 25th. I sat down with Jennifer to talk a little bit about it. Let's listen in. Jennifer, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining me today.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So I'm a big fan of Folk Alliance, as you know. What can we expect at Folk Alliance this year?
Well, we are going back to New Orleans in 2026. Were you there in 2020?
No, I was not.
Yes. So we were in New Orleans in 2020, right before the pandemic. And I think a lot of people have that as their last experience. So we're excited to be back in New Orleans. New Orleans has deep, rich culture and music. So to be in a city that just is surrounded by music is really exciting. And it's the same conference in a different location. We're have a lot of official showcasing performance, both official and private, and then excellent panels through the day. And it's a great opportunity to connect with folks in person.
Yeah, I'm such a big fan. You were recently promoted. You were named Executive Director for Folk Alliance International. Tell us about your new role.
Yeah, I've been in this role for a little over a year, but I've been with Folk Alliance since 2013. So over 12 years.
Wow.
And yeah, so I know the ins and out. I've done operations work with Folk Alliance and worked hand in hand with our previous executive director to really build the organization. There are only 3 of us full-time staff members back in well, actually, I didn't become a full-time staff member until 2014, actually. I was a contractor initially. So we grew it from 3 people to now we have 9 staff, and the budget was about 800,000 or 900,000, and now we're almost 2 million. So it's been fun to be part of that process of growing the organization. But as the executive director, it's a much different role. I am so used to hiding behind the computer and just like doing things, but now I have to be out and about. And so it's been fun to be out there and have the opportunity to speak to folks like you and and just represent the organization in an outward facing position.
Fantastic. So where can our listeners learn more about Folk Alliance?
Well, we have an excellent website. It's folk.org. So FOLK.org. And there's a lot of information on our website. We are on all the social media platforms as well. But I definitely suggest that you go to our website.
Well, I will see you in New Orleans. I'm looking forward to that.
I'm glad you're going to be there.
Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer. We'll talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Very interesting. So something from Edison Research, how do Americans spend their day with audio? Since 2014, Edison Research's Share of Ear survey has been answering the essential question, what % of daily listening time goes to various audio sources? The answer as of Q2 of 2025 can be found in this graph that we put up on the newsletter.
Right.
And it's really, really interesting.
Yeah, they sort of break down, the time that a lot of people listen to music. And this is based on a U.S. population of 13 plus. And they'll say things like, streaming music is 23% of your listening that day. And YouTube is 14%. And podcasts for a lot of these folks is 10%. What might jump out to many is the fact that AM/FM radio accounts for the largest slice of daily audio listening among Americans, 13 plus. Just over 1/3 of all daily time spent on audio goes to AM/FM, either over the air or streamed. At the same time, combining audio formats that are delivered via the internet, like music streaming, podcasts, YouTube, et cetera, those totals well over 50% of all listening time. And again, this post is from Edison's Weekly Insights email, and you can subscribe at edisonresearch.com/subscribe.
Very, very interesting. Interesting piece again from Media's Tatiano Cirisano. The music business is splitting in 2. Here's why songwriters are reinventing their role. So why the pure songwriter is disappearing? Streaming economics are harsh on all creators, but songwriters feel the impacts double. In the albums era, every contributor benefited from a sale, no matter which track they worked on. Meanwhile, in the streaming era, every track stands alone. Songwriters also earn a smaller share of the streaming pie than artists do, a share that is often split among multiple co-writers. In the U.S., mechanical royalty rates are fixed by the government, unlike sound recording royalties, which are negotiated in the free market. Even among full-time professional songwriters in their survey, the average annual income from songwriting was $25,400, hardly enough to sustain oneself without supplemental income.
Yeah, this is a great piece by Tatiana Cirisano, our friend over at Media. She writes that unlike artists, songwriters rarely have the supplemental revenue streams of touring or merch. The traditional archetype of a songwriter is one who remains behind the scenes, solely writing songs like Max Martin or Amy Allen, yet the career of a pure songwriter is increasingly difficult to sustain. It's no wonder finding new revenue streams was the most popular choice when we surveyed songwriters about their current goals, or that the minority of respondents identified mainly as songwriters.
Right. So she goes on to say the songwriting world has new rules. The result is that a growing number of songwriters are coming out from behind the curtain. She says our study revealed several paths songwriters are taking. Some of the most common were, number one, building social media brands, both for industry networking and to nurture fan bases of their own, like Bonnie McKee and Bailey Flores, 2 examples.
Yeah, and also selling their skills as work for hire on creator marketplaces like SoundBetter or Fiverr. And that bypasses traditional royalty frameworks. And the next one was taking on more roles like performing, playing instruments, and producing.
Right. She also mentions launching music-adjacent side hustles like a podcast about mental health in the music industry, a cafe for creatives to gather at, or even a songwriting notebook company. All good ideas.
Right. And Tatiana includes this really cool graphic. You need to check it out in the article in your morning coffee or on Midia's website. And this graphic says all the plate spinning songwriters cobble together income from a fragmented mix of sources. And it talks about where they get their revenue, whether it's mechanical royalties, performance royalties, sync, all of that. And it lays it out in this graph beautifully. So Tatiana finishes this up by writing that our latest report delves into the answers. Visit the songwriter's landing page for more information about Midia's songwriter work and receive a free sample of the new report, which marks our second annual edition. The full report is downloadable. There's an Excel spreadsheet with 100+ segments, and that's available to their clients at mediaresearch.com/songwriters.
A lot of great work went into that. Very interesting indeed.
Yeah.
Well, Jay, before we get into the bigger stories, what do you say we thank our sponsors?
I think that's a great idea, Mike. We are sponsored by Hypebot. Since 2004, Hypebot has chronicled the new music industry and the trends and technologies that are changing how music is discovered, consumed, marketed, and monetized. It's edited daily by our friend Bruce Houghton with help from Alana Bonilla. Hypebot and sister blog Music Think Tank are published by live music discovery and marketing platform Bands in Town.
Yes, indeed-o. Bands in Town. Over 90 million live music fans trust Bands in Town to get personalized concert alerts, recommendations, and messages from their favorite artists. It is the #1 artist service platform connecting over 650,000 artists with their superfans. Managers, labels, agencies, and artists access their own dashboard to manage and promote their tour dates across all platforms. Love Bands in Town indeed. So, and every week, yes, every week for how many times? Almost 300 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
I get to hang out with my good friend Jay Gilbert. He is a music industry consultant. He's the curator of the weekly Your Morning Coffee newsletter and a former executive with Universal Music, Sony Music, and the Warner Music Group.
Yeah, that's right. I can't believe it's been 300. We're closing in on
Almost.
5 years and 300 or so episodes. We'll have to do a celebratory episode. I get to do this podcast every week with my good friend Mike Etchart, longtime host of Sound and Vision Radio, formerly of SST Records, Warner Music, Capital EMI, and Universal Music Group. And before we hit record, we were talking about this new Billy Joel documentary. It's called And So It Goes. It's a 2-part documentary. I'm a little bit ahead of Mike on this one. I've seen both as of last night, and you've seen part 1. And I won't spoil it for you, but it's one of the better documentaries I've ever seen, and I'll probably watch it again.
Yeah, well, and as you and I were talking, it really, if you do get a chance to watch it, and we do recommend it, you recognize, the importance of a good producer, and in terms of Billy Joel's rise, there's fascinating stuff on that. And for early in his career, his then wife, was his manager, and what a bulldog she was.
In an era where there weren't a lot of women in those positions.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, it's really great. It's a wonderful documentary, and we're going to get to part 2 tonight.
Yeah.
We're going to get going on.
All right.
Indeed. All right. Our first story we're going to talk about, it's from Kristen Robinson, our friend over at Billboard. Will the rise of AI music content creators start competing with traditional artists? She says they may not tour, sign label deals, or issue physical records, but AI music content creation is a fast-growing path to monetary success in music. Will they disrupt the status quo?
Yeah, this is such a great piece, and we highly recommend that you read the whole thing and subscribe to Kristen Robinson's email, Machine Learning. But Mike and I sat down, and these are our 10 takeaways from the article. The first one, the emergence of AI music creators. We've been talking about this a lot lately. AI music content creators are really gaining popularity and some financial success, challenging traditional artists by leveraging platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and Patreon for income.
Yeah. Another one, shift from parody to originality. She says initially AI music was often used for parody covers, but it has evolved to include original songs created with AI technology, leading to a broader acceptance of AI-generated music.
Right. Our next takeaway was technological advancements, and that's AI music creation tools. They've really advanced significantly, and they enable users to produce high-quality music that now can compete with human-created songs. I know that sounds crazy, but we're there.
No, absolutely. Another takeaway was viral success stories. Several AI-generated songs have gone viral, and creators are seeing growing listener bases on streaming platforms like Spotify, indicating a shift in audience preferences.
Right. And the next one, this is really important, regulatory challenges. Many streaming services, they don't have specific policies yet to address AI music, and that leads to a potential competition and royalty disputes between AI and traditional artists.
Right. Another takeaway was concerns over quality and authenticity. She says, while some AI music is viewed as comedic or low quality, in other words, AI slop, one of my favorite words as we're talking about AI, others argue that well-crafted AI music can be innovative and actually enjoyable.
Yeah, and she covers stigma and acceptance. There's a stigma surrounding AI music creation for obvious reasons, and some traditional artists and fans are expressing concerns over authenticity and these copyright issues.
Right. Another issue is potential for industry adoption. Experts predict that record labels may eventually embrace AI music creation as it offers cost-effective opportunities without the complexities of human-artist relationships. Those pesky artist relationships, Jay.
Yeah, and you and I talked about this a little bit before we hit record. It's, there's a big difference between sort of functional music, like music for sleep and lo-fi hip-hop to study to, and then something that's EDM, country, pop, that's pretending to be a real human. And that leads us beautifully into one of the last takeaways here is that the human element, it still remains valuable. Despite the efficiency of AI music, the human connection, creativity, and live performances are still seen as irreplaceable aspects of music that audience appreciates.
Right. And she talks about the future landscape. The music industry may evolve, she says, into two distinct segments: traditional human-made music and AI-generated content, each serving a different audience, their needs and preferences.
Yeah.
Well, very, very interesting.
Yeah,
and,
great piece from Kristen.
Great piece from Kristen. Absolutely.
Yeah. There were a couple of stories this week on this report that Spotify put out about super listeners. And we've been talking about super fans a lot lately, but this is just a little bit different take on that. So the first one was from Daniel Tenser at Music Business Worldwide, and the headline was, "Super listeners make up just 2% of an artist's monthly streaming audience, yet they buy 50% of concert tickets." So the music industry has been intensely focused in the recent years on better monetization of the super fan, that segment of the music audience that's more engaged and willing to spend more money on their favorite artists. And you and I have talked about this ad nauseum.
Yes, we have. Well, now Spotify has identified a new segment within its own audience, what it calls super listeners. On the surface, that may seem like another name for super fan, but Spotify's definition of super listener seems to be a smaller subset of super fans. And the streaming platform says that this small group, that it's key to growing a loyal fan base.
Right. And while Luminate in its mid-year report, by the way, we just dropped that special episode last week with Jamie Markinet that breaks that report down. You gotta listen to that one. It's so good. Anyway, while Luminate in its mid-year report identifies 18% of the U.S. music listeners as super fans, Spotify says that only 2% of listeners on its platform qualify as what they call super listeners.
So, is an audience segment that small worth paying attention to? Spotify says yes. According to their data, super listeners account for 18% of all streams, are 9 times as likely to share music with their network, and account for a whopping 50% of all artist ticket sales through Spotify.
Interesting. One super listener streams 20 times as much of an artist's music as programmed listeners. For example, those listeners who click on a track because it appeared in a playlist or a recommendation. And in a survey of about 4,500 US-based listeners, this group reportedly is spending more than $25 per touring artist on merch, live shows, and other purchases in just the last 30 days.
Well, they also display a great deal of loyalty. More than 50% of an artist's super listeners will still be listening 6 months later. In other words, they're the super fans that truly drive an artist's career.
Right. Now it's super fans. Here we go.
That's right.
So this blog post from Spotify said that these fans aren't casual. They're committed. You know, if you're looking to build a real fan base that sticks around and keeps showing up for your music, it's not just about getting more listeners. It's about connecting with the right ones.
Right. To that end, and with an eye towards a little self-promotion, Spotify is offering up some tips on how to use the platform's tools to identify and build an artist's super listener base.
All right. Well, let's talk about some of Spotify's tips. Artists who are signed up to Spotify for Artists can use the analytics dashboard to identify super listeners by going to Audience, then to Segments, to see how many listeners are super listeners, moderate listeners, or light listeners.
And artists can also go to Audience, again to Overview, to see the source of stream graph that shows where listeners are finding the music, whether through playlists or by actively searching an artist's profile page, catalog, or release pages. Spotify has devised a fan funnel to help artists visualize how to move listeners from being passive fans to active fans, and identified 3 stages, each one requiring a strategy of its own.
All right, and that starts off with the growth stage, and that consists of potential listeners and program listeners, you know, those hearing an artist's music through playlists, recommendations. Artists can use discovery mode or playlist pitching to bring potential listeners to their music.
Right, and the reactivation stage involves previous listeners who've dropped off and haven't listened to an artist's music in the past 28 days. Artists can use showcase and marquee campaigns to nudge those listeners back to their music.
Right. By the way, all of these things we're talking about here are paid for one way or another. Spotify goes on to say that because campaigns hone in on listeners in specific audience segments and based on real streaming behavior, they're effective at moving listeners down the funnel. They note that listeners who see a marquee or showcase, those are ads, are twice as likely to become super listeners during a campaign than those that don't.
So the engagement stage is about maintaining the fan base an artist has built. And that, Spotify says, is about new releases and new events. The platform recommends that artists keep their profile pages fresh with new merch and clips. New editions of tour dates help artists appear in the concerts near you and live events feeds and in personalized concert recommendations.
Yeah, and of course, you know, new releases matter. Spotify says it sees an 18% spike in super listeners after a new release. Claudia Zamora, who's the product marketing manager over at Spotify and music promotion, says there's something powerful about knowing who's showing up the most consistently. These are fans who stay engaged, spread the word, and support artists across the board.
Right. Those who closely follow the music business will no doubt be eager to see how Spotify addresses super listeners in its long-awaited Music Pro tier, and whether that tier provides to be a boon for artists looking for a broader audience and better earnings in the streaming economy. All right. So just so we know, so it's super fans, super listeners, and super listeners?
Super duper?
Super duper listeners?
Our next story is also from Daniel Tenser from Music Business Worldwide, and the headline, Music Industry Backs Reintroduced Rap Act that would bar lyrics from being used as evidence in U.S. court trials. And this is a big deal this week. Major music industry companies and organizations are once again throwing their weight behind a proposed law that would prevent rap and other lyrics from being used as evidence in criminal and civil trials.
So the Restoring Artistic Protection, that's the RAP or RAP Act, was reintroduced in the U.S. House of Representatives on Thursday, July 24th by Georgia Democratic Representative Hank Johnson and California Democratic Rep. Sidney Comlager-Dove. The bill would change the rule of evidence for federal courtrooms, making song lyrics inadmissible unless prosecutors can meet strict criteria, such as showing that the lyrics were meant to be taken literally.
Right. It's got the backing of the music industry groups like the RIAA. It's got the Recording Academy, as well as major music companies, including Universal Music Group and Warner Music Group.
Right. The issue of using lyrics, particularly in rap lyrics, as evidence at trials has been controversial for years, with many lawyers, lawmakers, and activists arguing the practice has targeted black people because of the common practice of describing violent acts in rap lyrics, which are often purely fictional.
Right. But they wrote about a couple of things here that really cracked me up. Representative Johnson said in a statement, Freddie Mercury did not confess to having just killed a man by putting a gun against his head and pulling the trigger, and also said that Bob Marley did not confess to having shot a sheriff, and Johnny Cash did not confess to shooting a man in Reno just to watch him die.
That's right. Johnson cited research showing at least 820 instances of creative works being used as evidence in criminal trials. One of the most recent instances involved the criminal trial of Atlanta rapper Jeffrey Williams, a.k.a. Young Thug, who was charged with running a criminal organization under RICO laws. Prosecutors allege that Williams headed up a criminal gang called YSL, or Young Slime Life. Lawyers for the rapper argued that YSL was actually Young Stoner Life, a successful record label that is now an imprint of Warner Music.
Right. A judge in the case ruled that prosecutors could use at least 17 specific lines of lyrics from Young Thug and other YSL artists as evidence in the case. Williams' lawyer argued that this was racist and discrimination because the jury will be so poisoned and prejudiced by these lyrics, poetry, artistry, speech, that it was tantamount to, quote, unlawful character assassination, end quote.
Right. The RAP Act was first introduced in Congress back in 2022 by Representative Johnson and the New York Democratic Representative Jamal Bowman, but the bill failed to make it out of subcommittee and was never brought to a vote on the floor of the House. The bill's backers are hopeful it will gain more momentum this time around.
Right. And Recording Academy head Harvey Mason Jr. said, weaponizing lyrics or other creative works in court is a harmful tactic that stifles artistic expression and undermines the voices of not just musicians, but all who create and shape culture. With the reintroduction of the RAP Act, we continue to build momentum, ending this unjust practice. That's a really, really good thing.
All right, Jay, our next story. It is from Music Business Worldwide, and the title is ONErpm's Emmanuel Zunz. He says there are no more distribution companies. There are no more record labels. There are just companies providing solutions to creators. In the past year, Nashville-headquartered ONErpm has continued its remarkable growth trajectory, positioning itself as one of the music industry's most significant independent players.
Yeah, but don't make the mistake of calling it an independent distributor. For one thing, it's much more than that. For another, ONErpm's founder, Emmanuel Zunz, looks with disdain on that very phrase.
Yeah, so here are the 12 key takeaways from this article. So ONErpm was founded back in 2010 and self-funded. It's grown into a significant independent player in the music industry, projected to reach around $300 million in gross revenue.
Right.
Their marketing presence, interestingly, the company operates in over 40 territories globally and holds a 2.7 market share on Spotify, making it one of the platform's largest partners.
Right. A couple more of our takeaways. They talk about artist success. ONErpm artists have received over 150 Grammy nominations since 2017. That's a pretty good track record, highlighting the company's influence in the music industry. And they also talk a little bit about this philosophy shift. Zunz rejects traditional labels like independent distributor or record label, asserting that companies should focus on providing solutions to creators instead.
Right. Zunz emphasizes the importance of not accepting outside investment, which he believes preserves company autonomy and fosters long-term sustainability. That's their financial independence. And in terms of their growth strategy, the company aims for consistent growth through market penetration, geographic expansion, and higher margin deals with artists.
And they do have some focus markets. ONErpm is particularly interested in expanding its presence in Africa and Asia. They note that these regions are areas of significant opportunity. And they talk about some of the concerns around innovation. Zunz critiques the current stagnation in innovation within established markets like the U.S., calling for new direct-to-consumer strategies to enhance music consumption.
Right, but they've got some technological edge. The company's tech platform One System allows clients to monitor marketing campaigns and performance across various territories, positioning ONErpm as a leader, actually, in tech innovation. And Zunz argues that true independence goes beyond not being part of a major label. It also involves control over one's business decisions without external pressures.
Yeah, this is super interesting. He talks about how diversified their services are. ONErpm provides a range of services, including DIY distribution, licensing, catalog purchases, and artist management, embracing a real comprehensive approach for this modern music business needs.
Well, in their long-term vision, the Zunz is committed to building a transparent and fair music ecosystem for creators, indicating that while progress has been made, there's still much work to do in transforming the industry. Well, I've certainly knew about them, but really interesting article getting the details.
Interesting.
Well, Jay, it is time to wrap up the show, if you can believe that or not. If you enjoy our show, please tell just one friend. Jay and I would certainly appreciate it. And, of course, big thanks to Hypebot and Bands in Town for helping us put on the show every week. And that cool music underneath our sponsors is actually from our friends, the Licorice Quartet. And boy, we really like their music.
Yes.
Love that music.
Yeah.
So on behalf of my good friend Jay Gilbert, I am Mike Etchart. Thanks for listening in, and we'll be back next week on the Your Morning Coffee Podcast.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.